G'day, mate.
Good day, David.
Yeah,
Thank you so
yeah,
much.
yeah. Always
How's it going?
helping people, in the world. A lot of things, matter of fact. When I was a young bloke, of course, growing up on the islands, I had sometimes several thousand animals, and I looked after those animals. And you could see lots of things, but you had to see everything, healing up naturally. Yeah. And then interesting, people break bones, all sorts of things, and then they go into where it's a hospital, and pretty much, actually, if you ask anybody there, they ever seen anything heal up like this naturally? The answer always is no.
Uh
Yeah,
huh.
it's pretty much actual that where somebody's got something, well, you've got to have screws, and they've got to have a bit of surgery and this sort of thing. Yes. Interesting, like a lot of things actually really, no matter where you could look, you'll see up the cost of whatever, and it's like a pretending service often for some financial gain evermore. But if we could talk a bit about it, because where a world could have lost its way just a bit, but some thread is present, that one could follow. We've been talking a bit about heat and cold shock protein, which is really essential where someone's healing bone, just the same as anywhere. Matter of fact, the whole body uses these hot and cold shock protein. That's why, like in your training, you're doing what you can to bring people up to their a maximal level relative to, stress them, yes,
Yes,
in their
sir.
fitness. That's right. And you're raising their temperature, and they're managing that and developing these heat shock proteins. Very important, because that prepares the body to manage things. Fitness, that's an environmental thing. And you know that, like when you're born, you're only born with so much muscle. That's it. That's all the cells you'll ever have the rest of your life. But
Wow.
if we could look at a baby's muscles, and then look at your muscles around your neck and think, Jesus, what happened there? You know what I mean?
Oh my.
There's muscles there, huge, and they grew, and they really grew, and they grew from the blood corpuscle having extravasated itself, meaning outside the vessel, got stuck where the endothelial cell was there, where some stress was of the myosin actin filament. And when you sleep at night, the double spore catch of the corpuscle migrate and aggregate and fuse and differentiate into the myosin actin filament, filling things out and building the biggest protein that you actually have in your body. A huge, matter of fact, out of all the proteins that we have, it's what stores, glucose, glycogen, and things. But coming back full circle, you've got a bone broken, let's say the collarbone, whatever, and it could be overlapping even, like sometimes if someone's fallen off a bike like 4 centimetres or whatever, but the biomechanics of the body, as it's used, is going to bring that bone out to the size it's supposed to be where you use it as it heals. If you don't use it
Oh.
as it heals, now you know that in the time past when somebody had an injury, you always would use, you'd use ice and elevation, and rest,
Oh yeah.
and this is, you use ice, but you don't use rest anymore. Use
Oh God.
exercise instead. Yes.
Oh. Oh. Okay.
Which
That's
yeah,
good.
yeah. Totally. Why? Because the biomechanics is starting to actually cause your muscle to actually, be in the proper condition. So, for instance, the osteoclasts, they move in and they reabsorb bone, which could have been overlapping when this example, osteoclasts have moved in there. You use heat hot and cold shock protein, you use comfort compacts, and you do some few things like that. You'd be surprised. The osmolytic nutrient that the body could produce there goes right in and actually assists to cause and move all that and reabsorb that bone, and then dissolve it. And so where the overlap was, it's all sort of gone. Now the osteoblast, the other cells there, yeah, and they migrate, forming into new bone matrix, and providing that you've used your muscles and your arm or whatever where this was, it's going to cause the
Right.
biomechanics to absolutely only be in a set like it's supposed to be, and pretty much the bone is going to grow out to what it should, low, like let's say 4 centimeters overlap was. By the time the bone, as that's all knitted back smooth, it would, and it'll be a little bit larger there where the break was. It'll and as you use the muscle and the arm, it's going to cause it to actually be able to grow to the degree that it's supposed to relative, and maybe you're left with something that's close to being exact like it was relative, yes, given the chance. And so, if many times over, if somebody came a bit too late, they went, oh wow, bones start to ossify, I don't think we're going to operate. And so now these people all get to see something heal up more, and they go, wow, well, Jesus, I healed up and I don't have all those pins and screws. I wonder what happened, you know.
Wow.
So we use beautiful substance, you know, like in the comfrey root that you do a comfrey compress with. I mean, things like that's quite amazing. But in our formulas, osmolytic element and sorrelin is a plant which it has its citrus, bergamot, clove, sort of like phytotaxin types of molecules, which you could also find in cabbage and the the BCT formula that we have, wild thyme and the vacuous, a variety of these indole and sulfur molecules, which you could really just only be able to get something inside the cell. These heat shock proteins, which could you use far infrared or sauna, or you use exercise and stuff, you're driving these phytonutrients in. It's a time that actually you could do a little bit of supplementing before you actually do your exercise and stuff and bring your temperature up.
Oh, wow.
And then go ahead and teach people just a bit, go ahead and do the abrasives just a bit as part of your training. Once you've heated yourself up good, go ahead and quick, smart, cool yourself down somewhere where you're doing a shower or something, and you really, just to be part of the training and your fitness, you do it abrasive, you bring it down to be abrasive and keep it at an abrasive level for a little bit, and that's sort of really what causes cold shock proteins, which actually will clear away and reabsorb the ends of that bone and assist cause osteoclast to be functional. So that's why I just put off and onto a condition which is like that. And so you've really got molecules which really, like far infrared heat shock protein, like protein 24, for instance, it really is engaging this beta amino butyric acid, or BABA, like GABA, but BABA, which induces our primary defense, you see. And you've got these cold shock protein, which is essential, like in our formula, we've got like these phytoalexins and synthesis that stimulates calcium ions. A very selectedness of care gone into those forms that we just mentioned, and it's way more than just like a vitamin C complex, whole food vitamin complex, but you've got the silica there, which absolutely helps as a template cause your body to be able to produce protein again. See, so it's more than just like, oh, you're going to take this, but no, it's teaching your body how to produce this again. See, and that's what nature does. Yeah, you got to have your enzymes. Yeah, has to be like nature. Remember I was a little boy, I looked at this egg, and I had to learn how to tell if it was a fertilized egg. And so I'd hold it up to the light, and I'd see if it had a red blood corpuscle in it, because that would be the first thing that formed. And everybody sort of knew that, but nobody could say nothing about it. I was thinking to myself, well, that's a red blood corpuscle. It sure is. Oh, yeah. And I was thinking, well, how did that red blood corpuscle form? Just in my mind as a boy, 12 days old egg, after 3 days, is 600% more element in the egg. It never took any nutrition, none. And there's no way that all that solid substance could have ever come from the shell. That was impossible. I could see that things were life transmutated, one thing into another, and that life was growing a lot of things, and that this explained everything. Now, I didn't know what the rest of the world knew. I only just had an idea I could see this. And lo and behold, that comes to be the fact as I learn about things. I study Lapinchotsky's work in Russia and Tashima's work in Japan in hematopoiesis, which is a study of blood formation.
Oh, yeah.
I come up and I see, as I'm looking under the most sophisticated microscopes on the earth where gastronasal is, people could read a bit more about that, but I could see how important it was that, you had to have the proper level of carbon and this sort of thing. So, breath through the nose, as we always have talked, otherwise hypercapnia really is there. People have breathed off their carbon, and it should be more than 7%. If it's lower than that because you breathed it off because you were mouth breathing, one should always nose breathe for the rest of their life and lay more straight on their back as they sleep. I mean, the molecular sort of communication which is existing, which is really quantum sensing from one cell to another, is working really nice when you've got a quiet breath. You build carbon. And exercise also too. You don't have everybody panting like crazy. That's just completely not the right way to exercise whatsoever. Must be just relaxed and quite relative, breath relative.
Okay.
And trainedness more for things such. The response between the cells, you're always going to be conferring more their communication, providing you've got salt, a mineral there, and it's giving you that conduction. And then when you sweat, you're going to need to make sure that you're keeping minerals. People exercising, making sure they're putting minerals into everything that they do.
Okay.
And then they're going to keep water in their blood. You want to perform good? Right. Keep water in your blood. If you don't have mineral, you're going to sweat it out. And what's going to happen? Suddenly you've got 2 litres water, not enough. That's right. Don't have the hydraulics to lift your arms. And has anybody ever felt they went to the limit like that? Yes. And that's what happened. You see? So if you moderate what that is, you're able to keep it. That's a fitness where somebody is, and that you sustain yourself more. And nobody's going to say that you don't sustain yourself more. You're going to actually have an edge. You sure do. You've got an edge which is about endurance. Plus, if you've got good style, if you come down on something, you're going to come in where you use your force. Now you're using a force right. If you just go at something, that's going to be wrong. Because why? The force is not moved back into your body. And when it is, this is like how you've got the full force of your whole weight of yourself. But if you don't, you won't, and one has to know how to go down when they're doing something like this versus straight or necessarily up. When you go up, you put your weight behind it, you're coming from the ground, but when you're coming down versus just going straight at something, you're putting all your weight into what you're striking forward. It's a concept to think about, but you could think about this. You'll see a biomechanics going on, and it's like a bigger force. It can be measured. But L. cerebrus and L. plantarum are the organisms you're supposed to have in your intestinal tract. I mean, we're vegetarian. We are plant-based. We're not animal eaters, and there's 30 different surfactants that show we're not. Why? Because it's all accumulated in the nucleus, can't be broken down, and we can't eat anything from insects or birds or fish or animals, because the surfactant can't be broken down properly, it impacts protein transcription in the cell otherwise. But these cold shock proteins can come in and help clear up and actually renew DNA by having proper ribosome and things, which are these tiny small particles which protein is made up out of, and associating those proteins into the proper order that they should be, and finding where things are out of order and snipping that out and putting a new copy back in there. Life colloid do this called ubiquitin 1, 2, and 3, and these are very specific, selected for DNA and each of our formulas. So I looked at this in 1978, and I really have been investigating things, and just like I could just tell you like a small story, and I don't have to really be getting that from anywhere. It's just like somebody, you could ask me something about temperature, for instance, or anything. What's temperature dependent? Has anybody actually talked about what this is? And what would be the reason by 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit? We have a set temperature. And then when we have that set temperature, potassium is kept in your blood, your red blood corpuscle. And when it gets lower than that, potassium isn't kept proper in your red blood corpuscle. Temperature is very dependent, and you've got to have sodium and potassium to pass over the membrane, and that causes electrical potential. And I used to do Jubb cell rejuvenation and these rejuvenation trainings and things, and you'd always be putting in the whole brain functioning, so people would be getting rid of don't, won't, can't, should, try, but, must only in their speech, and everybody would be getting rid of all their internal dialogue. And through life, they'd be focused, and they had a message to get rid of all their internal dialogue and stuff. Okay. And we would do, Andy and I, a quality of life index beforehand. Sometimes they'll come some few weeks before, and then we would do one pretty much like a few weeks after the training, and then another one like a few months afterwards, just to see if what had changed. And it would be just radical, actually, the quality of life index that people had. And if you could imagine, actually, just for a moment in time, you really start to become educated, and you really feel leisure, and you've got a great security, freedom, and you've got a feeling of a social belongingness, and this is the things which cause well-being, for sure, and the quality of your life, where you are, where you move toward life food, and you're framing things positively, you're really more in whole brain functioning, you've got a lot more social welfare, a reflectiveness, and you've got a great expectation and an enhanced quality of life. And so you've got access to things, haven't you? You've got access to reward more, and you've got really internal motivation, because that's better than a kick in the pants, like KITA, which spells kick in the pants. And you've got negative forms and positive forms of keta there, but those only things cause movement, where an internal generator is where you're learning, growing, achieving, getting recognition, and these sorts of things. And these are the sort of things that people participate in day out. So when somebody does whole brain functioning training, and they're doing an experiential-based training where you're taken through these elements, and how you perform in those elements, we can calibrate the things that you're doing and what's going on more inside, and what's your decision-making strategy and this sort of thing. So personal health really, and your spiritual relation that you have, and your good capacity to self-initiate, your partnering and your team building and this sort of thing, it's really more like a social belonging where somebody has these skills developed. And this doesn't happen just by sitting around. It actually happens like you're going out, you've got class, you do class where people are, talking to parents, you're talking to kids, you're talking to people, you've got sounding board. These are often the best people in the world. They make the best partners, teachers often do, because they're really allowing, and they're really focused more, they're really caring more about adding to the quality of life of others. And isn't this what would be a great world where everybody has this, and you're inspired? It's just a random acts of kindness that's left behind, around any great act itself. But excessive cortisol otherwise, like with a don't, won't, can't, should, try, but, must only, it always is like there for excessive cortisol. And did anybody say that? Well, they shouldn't they? Because you can see that where a lot of cortisol is, where stress is, the skin vitality isn't really kept lustrous, is it? Hair quality isn't actual of its sheen and proper thickness. One doesn't have a smoothness and flow, and then fall asleep fresh but feel very fatigued. Adrenal fatigue, and then what happens to people's body? If you check it out, they get that fatty hump between the shoulders. Yep. And now they get these pink little purple sort of stretch marks on the skin and things where they start to lose weight and that sort of thing. And their blood pressure generally have a bit of challenge and that sort of thing. They feel quite irritable, and they've got a saggy abdomen, which is really the overproduction of cortisol, which causes it's called belly hang. Belly and butt hang is because somebody has excessive cortisol not broken down properly.
Wow.
And cortisol eventually slowly becomes lost because it's just like fat strap. Somebody's trying to have it. But always insulin would have never ever had its proper sensitivity into things just like this for the cells. And you could see weight gain massively, and then eventually it's just weight loss, you see. So isn't it something like 40% of the United States here, adults are basically obese, I think, and 7.7% or 7.7 or something, I think, maybe severe obese. And so 74% of people are showing that they're overweight, and and many, even some ethnicities, have the highest rate of obesity. So pancreatic function declines because of all this sediment that's being eaten. I mean, a lot of don't want, can't, should, try, but, must, only, and clip sort of language. So where things are smooth and someone feels happy or comfortable, you can hear that sort of a slight sort of roll where speech is. Otherwise, speech can become what's called clipped. And then I'll give you an example of that in a second. But clipped language is always coming from the amygdala and the tegmentum of the brain, but when they're firing, it just doesn't let the frontal cortex function. So, it's coming from the adversive componentry. So speech, which is sort of clipped, to give you an example, it would be like, if you talk like this, it's going to be bad for you. That's a pretty good example of clipped language. So it's really like rap is clipped, and it's the analogue of adversive neurology within ourselves.
Okay.
So it's after a program where somebody it's a really great deal of improvement that's kept afterward. And it does show people's quality of life index really improves, quite radical. It's really what's meaning before you think or you do anything, precognitive. We all of us have a set of things that's inside, and that already is set. And so could some of these things that we're talking about today in our program cause things to be reset below, to cause new information to be coded better in a more powerful way? But the pancreas and the adrenal gland must be restored, and the only way that you can do that is to improve hygiene of your blood. And when you improve the hygiene of your blood, your Kupffer cells can produce more albumin, which transports everything. And only that you can raise albumin, that we really clean the hygiene up of the blood. But in our bright being evermore, it's really just because you're focused and you're getting gained agreement. And what happens when you haven't focused on that? Well, that's not going to be right. Everybody who has success, they really focus on more getting a gained agreement. And isn't this experience more of happiness and grace and things just flowing? And where somebody has learned that there's 4 absolute forms of violence that we do, and they're the biggest violent things that anybody does. And one is dissociating, meaning walking off, leaving, shutting down, stopping, and controlling, like being a control freak, and doing those sorts of things which within ourselves. The second most form of violence is where people dissociate, not actually focused on what they should or could, which would be wise to in a moment, but totally bringing a lot of other things up and just to control. And so that's called distraction. Another one is to interrogate, where questions that one has of themselves or others is really other than causing your model to feel good and large. So it means it shrinks the model. That's called to interrogate. And intimidate is like, if you don't do this, you're going to be like lost to something sort of thing that you care for. So that's intimidation. These are 4 forms of violence, utter. But when we could stop that for 1 year, please, and then what one does then is to really put in a resource state. So you're focusing on, as you're a student, you're focusing on what you could do to be better at what you're doing, and you're thinking about excellence where you are and degrees of excellence, because it's really a comfort more that you could be having more bright and fresh where you are as you're listening to what this is here. Pay attention, because we've really got some really great shows more that's coming up. But championing people like you do, Luke, to get behind kids and people in your team, and building these skills, which you've always, which I think is really admirable, said, of course, that raise a healthy child, raise a healthy village, raise a healthy nation. And that's one of the most Confucius things anybody could ever do. But championing bliss, which comes from your achievement, and achieving emptiness by getting rid of all your internal dialogue, is the start, And so what's the evidence of that? Somebody comes before you. Can you hear and see and feel that somebody actually is focused on things which is going to be more beneficial for them, or are they still focused on stuff that's really totally not beneficial? So drop all the stuff that's not beneficial, keep the stuff that is, and focus on the things which is ever more coming from within ourselves. Because actually, if a thought came from you, wow, that's pretty good. Because 90% of most people's thinking, it's really something that's coming from other people. And it's just like, yeah, most people are doing a sort of a mind reading there, which is pretty easy to sort of drop that stuff. But being more timeless is what leisure is in recreation and play, and having a more positive relatedness and expectation, you see. So what would happen if somebody has a more positive expectation? It's just that the possibility something exists, that's all. It doesn't mean that you'd be go, oh, well, I had a positive expectation and it didn't end up happening. It's that you've got a possibility of something existed, and you should be focused on the possibility of it, and you stay with the possibility, and then what's next after that? If you haven't received something, you've got a great strategy for managing failure. And so receptiveness is really being in receptivity, and you can't be putting these things which I'm saying into something else, stuffing it into some other model or something which would be really disastrous. Something which we're doing, like we're talking about, we're sort of getting a precognitive, meaning things are getting lined up more underneath. So, for instance, like when you use direction, you focus on going forward, not back, and you think about that in your speech. Is it that you've gone forward where your focus is? And is it that you focus on what we have within, and now you're associated? If you use direction outside, away from where something was, that's being more dissociated. There's a value in being associated and dissociated. It's just really, you're going to get rewarded more for being associated more in life rather than showing up completely dissociated where most people are. But, a usefulness is really actually seeing what somebody can do. But how many of us are actually innovative? We could have grown up in an environment where you could be more innovative and you could adapt and very adaptive to get something done, like a gorilla with a stick. Otherwise, there's a lot of sabotage stuff. Oh, I can't do that. I won't do that. I wouldn't be able to. This doesn't exist. There's no possibility, and shut down. And so the average person is going to tick the box that they would have done a lot more in their life, as they, just before they die, they tick that box. Really, to laugh and to serve and be in service is really less talk, of course, and no nonsense. Really, it's really more an existence of endogenous opiates and enkephalins, endorphins, and these things, which that's because you feel good, functioning more, and that's just what diminishes discomfort. And these beautiful endorphins and enkephalins, they block all the cell channels and things, which calcium channels and things, which will cause excitation, and they open up all these water pores and things to cause hydration and things, and it's just sort of adjusting the cell. So there's only 12 times during the day where you really release your human growth hormone when you're in a parasympathetic state. And that's maybe some talk which would be great for us to actually talk about at some point. But when you're talking about Jubb cell rejuvenation, you're triggering osmolytic element to come in, and you're emptying the stone out of the liver and pancreas, and you're improving the low molecular osmolytics of your intestinal tract, so that you can have all these proper proteins which you were supposed to have. And the brain gland is the largest organ, more or less, in its function. It has to be giving you a north negative. Otherwise, where these things not going on, which you could just see in behaviour.
Oh yeah.
So for instance, where someone is overdone stuff and they don't have minerals, overdoing things, got to get the minerals. Well, you're going to see withdrawal, and the person sort of withdraws, and they feel sort of not too much supported, even if support is there. They feel like they're being punished a little bit, and they'll have knee-jerked into trauma pretty quick. And a lot of that is because it's just a reenactment of a trauma reenactment syndrome of the past. But thinking and behaviour is very conditioned, and the endocrine disruption where any behaviour is really a lack of focus, of attention, and a missed opportunity about have learned how to respond, to how to change some prejudice, and the excess or something has gone on where a showing of that is sort of a real deep distraction, perhaps even, and a fixatedness, somnambulistic sort of trance, preferring just to do nothing during the day, being happy to escape because one did nothing. It's like, oh my God, you see, this is really disastrous. 78% of your nervous system you've got to have to get something to be passed on, and most of these people can't get anything to be passed on. Part of themselves want to do something, part of it doesn't, and so then nothing goes to take place because you've got 78% of your nervous system has got to be behind something to get something really passed on. And so because there's no proper amphoterics, no proper amphiphilics, no proper permittivity that's existed where salts are, where someone really doesn't have much far infrared, they're losing all their far infrared, and it's really an ultraviolet catastrophe because someone's just going white like a sheet and losing it all. And withdrawal, you could see sort of someone not to be too social, and dopamine and serotonin access certain disruption, and obsessive compulsive disorders by not being able to turn a thought off, even when you say, oh, is there another way to think about something? And somebody can't. It's just not possible for them to turn their thinking off, which, of course it is. It's just start to, you'll be noticed that you're the one who's in charge. You see, not somebody else who says, oh, I can't turn my thinking off. It's like, oh, got to start thinking about how you're doing that. The syntax of being in your kinesthetic, auditory, and visual self is the way that you have more whole bone patterning. And if somebody's focused on what success is, it's an outcome, and you focus just simply on what's supposed to be versus something in the past, it's a really slow. You've got more human growth hormone. You've got levels of insulin resistance to be perfect, and you've got a clearedness, of death and disease, and you've got really otherwise a lot of brain freeze going on, and behaviour that really is more analog sculpted, other than actually integrated, meaning pleasure and interest has caused things to flow within you. But so live food is really low phosphate. Live food is low methionine. One can learn about those things because those things are not too good for us. It can't have artificial light that kills, where people are in prison some places and stuff in the world and they just get high phosphate food. They don't have proper light. That kills you. That harms. That's wrong. That's unethical, absolute and utter. And anybody who's not paying attention to this is immoral unless somebody actually speaks about this. This is cruel and unusual punishment going on where people are and wake up. But nidulus of stone formed from tiny increpit particle from fats and acid material, which is get deposited in the connective tissue and becomes a corpora annatio, which is a calcium phosphate, sort of a stone and heavy metal deposit from these nano life colloid particles which form into the stone, and where people have lost B12, which comes from B17, was transmutated into cobalamin in the last three sections of your small intestine before it enters into the cecum. And you've got also B vitamins that, if you've got proper life colloid there, you've got capacity to be able to clear away all spike protein and stuff. And these incur because you've got natural light cycle, but you don't have that if you've got artificial light, which is kept on all the time and completely destroys someone's brain and mind, because that is not natural that you would ever do that. How dare anybody leave lights on where somebody is supposed to sleep? You see, that's cruel and unusual punishment. Wrong. How dare the world make money and bet on the stock market and put all that money into where things are, and that's growing the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund and all these things from prison and court bonds. How bad is that? Anyway, but I'm coming back where everybody is. It's more like you're getting out of civic confinement and entrapment, that you can truly have a longer life and you can learn to what to do food-wise. Life food, you could learn about it more, which is really 3 parts calcium and only 2 parts phosphate. And it's like roughly, like 26% of the body is phosphorus as enzyme, and the white blood cells, and so you've got dark and moist air, and you can see that things glow and have a luminescence. I mean, a dull white light when exposed to light, you could see sometimes light bearingness coming back out of things. I mean, proper DNA and RNA function involves light conduction through the body, and you've got a Jubb constant in a protocol, which is your temperature and temperature regulation, and you've got these hot cold proteins. You've got blue and white light. It's very bright that burns people's eyes and causes radiation damage to eyes and things. And the phase conjugativeness of red blocks red, lets blue in, and then in our molecules and things that people could learn about, you've got a positive magnetron hydrogen pump, which is pumping and continuously providing hydrogen ions, and it's getting that from 0 point energy and inside the mitochondria, and where you've got proper negative redox around minus 71 millivolts per square centimeter cubed. If it went down to minus 20, it's sort of really a sick state. The body can't kind of really depolarize itself, and enzymatic aerobic glycolysis gets kicked off instead in the cytoplasm, and it produces lactic acid, which puts pressure on the inside of the cells and causes more neoplastic condition once this is going on, because it's really not a proper energy pathway. I think that I think we should just cover just and complete, and then maybe there's some questions or something. But there's a calcium and phosphorus ratio on live food. If you go beyond that, you're going to get stone. Most people really have stone, and sweating and clearing away all of that really is a parasympathetic activity, sort of to be able to be relaxed. And GABA really is produced where you do your far infrared and you bring in these osmolytic element, and then you do far infrared where this is. It really is what neutralizes cortisol. And otherwise, dopamine and serotonin really is, you've got a really nice balance. And then you're determining more how Jubb's instrument, which could determine for you conditions of whole brain function. You could learn a bit more about that, so you really focus more on practicing more whole brain patterning where you are. And there's so much that you could learn. You've got to sit back, listen. This is like a cooking show. Put it in the background, and even just have it on whilst you fall asleep. Suddenly you're going to have all the information. It's all sort of really locked in there, and you've got really great recall for everything. But you've got oxytocin, which really connects everybody together, and you really feel good as you feel connected to people. You're releasing oxytocin, you see. And so you actually absolutely have to have total dark where you sleep. You can't have light, And you've got enzymes in the body like luciferin, which is an example of protein, which is sort of really releases light. And tyrosine is one of those amino acids, which is really incredible because it's the only one of the major amino acids that actually can carry a mineral within it, and like rhodium, and other things, which also by, luciferin, that enzyme really is a natural length of light, which is really, really small, 555 nanometer to 450 nanometer range. You've got a natural illumination, and you've got pyramidal waves that are natural, not square waves. And so, you and I, we should have proper natural waveform where things should be pyramidal, which is natural, not squared out. So light contributes really more to a synthesis for RNA, which is ribonucleic acid, and also protein. And you've got a beautiful orange kind of like a glow more going on, and where the body is more in a far infrared, and as one loses their far infrared capacity, one becomes more cold and melancholy, and their and then they're looking at the word, oh gee, it's really superficial, and one's driven a bit more with arrogance a bit and anxiety, restless, and the temperature at night is supposed to fall all through the night. So make sure your thermostat turned off so it actually really falls all through the night until you wake up in the morning, because otherwise temperature coming on in the night is going to wake anybody up. That's wrong. It's supposed to fall all through the night.
Okay.
But exposure to more artificial things that's like that is really wrong. Get rid of all the lights and artificial lights and actually really make sure that actually red light more is at night, not blue or white or something that's like that. And people should really sleeping more on their back, not too all curled up and tucked over, and really breathing all these inorganics and stuff under the blanket or whatever. But sleep onset latency is heightened, and a sensitivity to that, where somebody's really got a lot of more bright lights towards the end of their night and sort of things. And so it's a mismatch really of the magna clock where light pollution is. And if your eyes really are letting light go through more to the pineal gland, which does, it's really because of your ability to be able to clear away and keep neoplastic condition at bay, you see.
Wow.
And so plastics in the body and these sorts of things, white, blue light, all those are things which are hazards. Which we could pay attention to get rid of all the plastics out of the body and sweat them out. You need osmolytic element to do that, where that's in our formula. And so high phosphate, high methionine food, artificial light kills. You've got these nebulous, like we were talking about how stones form, and they don't form all through the connective tissue and certainly in the pancreas. And these calcium phosphate, calcium carbonate, calcium oxalate, and these sorts of stones can have a bit of heavy metal deposit there too. And this all gets into the connective tissue, and you've got really a loss of B12, B vitamins, and these things. Bring back natural light. Be careful not to have too much artificial light. Bring back natural wavelength where something is. Focus on having more red light at night, warm light, instead of cold light. You've got, learned helplessness is, even if the choices existed, most people are not taking the choice. And Hans Seil did experiments in the 60s and 70s that showed this. Today it's called sort of Stockholm Syndrome, where somebody could have fallen in love with a slave-standard monkey. And influencing, or where something is, where learned helplessness is really like what's called Stockholm Syndrome. You've got choice where you are. You don't have to be factorized, and everybody's just not being where you could actually have a relation. And so there you've got a place in the world where most people can't really live together. And the Milgram experiment where it's going on really is where 33% of people listen to programs like this. 67% of people just would, if an authority person was there, they would do you harm. If you look into the Milgram experiment, you see. But 33% of people are really like more, and they're not going to be able to change their ethic whatsoever. And otherwise, you've got a really lot of Dunning-Kruger personality, where somebody's really, really, really confident, but what's beneath that is just nothing. God help us, just next to nothing. And so, roughly 3 parts of your body should be calcium to 2 parts sort of phosphate basic, but roughly 20% of the body is really phosphorus, where enzyme is, and where we're having excessive amounts of that, which you could see going on where life is, which is not life food. These are sorts of things which one should become a bit more aware about. Yes? So anyway, I think that's a small journey for us a little bit. I wonder, might there be some questions, mate? Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. I think I wrote some down in my phone. Let me grab that real quick. Okay, thank you so much, David. Got here. Okay. All right. Oh, I mean, she's always. I'm worried I'm gonna ask you a dumb question.
Oh no, they're the best questions to people standing by and wondering. And the best part of the show is these questions people have said. So.
Okay. Well, you got this thing called TikTok. I don't know if you heard of TikTok. It's an app on the phone, and it's used a lot now, especially commercially. People, they make videos that are educational, and then it's educational about like, just as an example, they'll sell Shilajit and sea moss, Conjur's crispus, and some of it's pretty cool. What's the other one? I wanted to ask you about, they got something called hydroxyapatite. It's supposed to rebuild your
appetite.
Your teeth or something.
Yeah, that's right. It sure does. That sure does.
Oh, nice.
And the things that are quite amazing. Matter of fact, you've got substance which could help grow and repair, and you've got substance which could clear away things. Today, I would say it would be good that someone could understand what goes on where someone can have had a flu or even something, because a lot of education isn't proper. But you've got melatonin being secreted, and most don't know how important melatonin is. Is one of the most powerful antioxidants, even more powerful than glutathione in the body, and that's supposed to be produced. In our cell rejuvenation where we are, it's really important that it's produced. If your insight below is logged, you've got something precognitive, and now you can process new information, right? So let's say somebody's core temperature dropped because they had a fever, and now they know that was because of E. coli overexpressing a cold shock protein, because the core temperature of the body dropped, maybe 7 degrees for 2 hours, and so the colloid that's in the intestine transmutated more because cold shock protein was released. And so that's going to cause somebody to suddenly have a fever. And what does that bring on? It brings on heat shock protein after that. But where anybody was with it for 2 hours and their core temperature was in an environment more, which was only 50 to 59, it didn't really were in a circumstance where they got cold, cold shock protein would have been slowly released over a few hours, and finally somebody would go, oh wow, they got a fever, well they don't feel too well. Now heat protein comes on, heat shock protein, it raises the temperature to 103 or something like that, and then the E. coli sort of can't exist where that is. And so the body really has a mechanism to raise and lower temperature, and aggregation, fusion, and differentiation occurs from non-overreactive sort of expressed cold shock protein, where fever is, and lipid protection really of your eye has these molecules that are thermoregulatory, more liposome, which really are essential, for B cells to get triggered and get kicked off. And you've got substances that activate the B cells, which really is produced more where the eyes are. Isn't that amazing? You see, you've got melatonin, which easily passes through any membrane. It's really, really high lipid loving, meaning lipophilicity, and also it's water loving too, hydrophilicity. So it's really found in a widespread number of all the cells, and low weight fragments of that molecule stimulate melatonin, and Jubb's black amber and berries and nuts and seeds all contain melatonin. Walzyme and digestate, of course, do, and then it gets clearing away of high methionine, which really is that spike protein, where things actually getting rid of spike protein. So melatonin really is very hypothermic, and it can generate 40 to 50% of the circadian core temperature whilst someone's sleeping, and under a hypercapnic kind of condition, meaning they'll overbreathe off their carbon it could have caused skin temperature to really become markedly impaired, which usually it does, and it really becomes quite cold. And it causes a reduced level of melatonin in circulation. And where someone is mouth breathing, their tonsillar tissue behind the back of the nose and the throat, where the orbital organ is, becomes inflamed and congested, and degrees of tissue hypoxia goes on, and low light exposure impacts and blocks melatonin production. And so congestion and light and these things could have caused glucose and cardiovascular function to be not well as what it could be, because you really could be learning a bit more how melatonin is naturally produced and this sort of thing. Well, what's another question, mate? Yeah.
Okay. Let's see here. So, gosh, I guess I had trouble speaking up for myself as a kid, and I just took what was offered in terms of relationships and things. This one person at my old gym, she hooked me up with a surgeon, and he did a septoplasty, and it didn't correct the broken nose that I have.
Right.
So I don't know. I really can't breathe out of one side of my nose.
Right. Yeah, that should be corrected, as it can be, which can be tubernucle and things just like that. It's really common for people to get a picture where they do a CAT scan. Many people, matter of fact, Leakey, don't have or have deviated septal conditions. And granted that where somebody has capacity to breathe through the nose, they must breathe through the nose, and it can be opening up itself as a result of what happens where you sleep. You'd be noticed if there's a breath through the nose all the way through sleep, or there isn't. But next to not much breath is necessary when one sleeps. So it's sort of the nose could be really not much where it could be, but perfectly fine enough for resting and this sort of thing.
Okay.
The very thing which could assist where that is to actually do some hot-cold therapy, and where you do ice and heat, and you do far infrared, and if you do some urine therapy during this period of time where you're snorting urine, and you're becoming more an athlete for holding the breath, so you're building carbon dioxide. You've got a great capacity to be able to clear away tissue, which only can have formed like that because of hypercapnia. The other thing is that where someone only is monophasic, that meaning only going to have dinner, good, because it's a 24-hour cycle, and our body's only designed to have monophasic things where somebody has lunch and dinner, that's diphasic, this doesn't work, they've got more humps going on. Triphasic, that's breakfast, lunch and dinner, that's got like a hell of a lot of humps going on. And so the more quiet the breath is, and the more opportunity the body has to be able to bring in these cold shock proteins, which clear and break things down. So cold is used where conditions are like that, just the same as hot. So doing a bit of hot-cold therapy on this, I think you'd be surprised that you could shift the things where the tissue is, you see, and because of that, now the tissue can shrink back to what it's supposed to be. No pressure exists, cortisol otherwise always would have released excessive ghrelin. That always would have caused someone to feel like restless and have done things to cause themselves to feel better, versus when you don't have cortisol, ghrelin is present, and that causes you to feel like hungry. And then when you don't eat, your stomach is signaling that it's empty, and that's causing ghrelin to be released more. And as ghrelin is released more, it's protecting your cardiovascular system, protecting all the breath through the nose, protecting all the organs. Having proper melatonin and these sorts of things is very important. You do this hot-cold therapy, I'm talking about hot-cold therapy on the nose and the face to help clear up this septal. And so breath could be, I'll guarantee you'll absolutely improve things radical. You'll see the tone of your face is actually improved. So why not completely therapeutically do a makeover on the head, which one can, one should, and why not spend a little bit of time just somebody like with a joint or with anything else, you're putting a bit of energy into something, which is really, you're eating fewer calories or somebody's doing the easy tea because it's sort of a mood elevator, but you've got tryptophan and things like this. You've got a natural tasting of food, smelling it. You're relaxing and taking time to be consumed of something. When you do, you're staying with a monophasic sort of program, and you're really bringing in these